What's up guys, I'm BTC. More changes on the PTR. This time it comes in the form of Sigma getting a nerf and Sombra getting a buff. The changes that happened on the PTR are not listed in any of the patch notes. However, over on the official Overwatch forums, this was confirmed as a deliberate change by the devs. Right out of the gate, I'm going to tell you that this nerf for Sigma and the buff for Sombra are not good. While it may seem like it's a benefit in the short term, it's actually not going to address the larger problems, and it will only exacerbate other problems. Don't worry, I'll fully explain all of it. The nerf to Sigma comes in the form of a new interaction with his barrier and Sombra's hack ability. What you're seeing right now is the live version of the game. When hacked, Sigma will be unable to throw his barrier or recall it or use any other ability like other characters. However, if he throws the barrier out and then gets hacked, while he can no longer recall the barrier, it will stay where it is until it's either destroyed or the hack ability wears off and Sigma can recall it again. This is entirely consistent with how other similar abilities work. However, on the PTR, what happens now is that if Sigma gets hacked, then the barrier will immediately be recalled. Note that it is recalled and not destroyed like with EMP. This is obviously a significant counter to Sigma and a buff to Sombra. Sigma is already fairly vulnerable to an enemy Sombra, and her ultimate is just devastating to him. This only pushes Sombra into even more of a hard counter against Sigma. I don't like this change for two reasons. The first is that Sombra is already a very strong counter against numerous characters in the game. It doesn't seem necessary or particularly good to make her even stronger of a counter against yet more characters. In a recent video, I talked about the need for Blizzard to address the double barrier situation. Not just for right now, double barrier, but also potential new characters that will have barriers that could be used in that comp. As it is now, the only truly effective ways to deal with barriers is to either completely ignore them and go around with a dive comp, or to use Sombra to shut them down. It does seem kinda silly, but you would think that destroying the barrier should be a viable option as well, but in the vast majority of cases, it just isn't. So my suggestion in a previous video was to grant bonus damage towards barriers on certain abilities for some characters. But the idea was to spread this out so it wouldn't be just one character that was unbelievably powerful in a specialty position where they were primarily used just to destroy barriers. We've already discovered that niche and specialty characters are bad for the game. So by adding this sort of thing, it would incentivize running other tank characters that are not reliant on a barrier. A D.Va defense matrix could eat that incoming projectile, Zarya could absorb it, a Roadhog could simply tank it. If the ability itself dealt a lot of damage to a barrier, but very little damage to the character itself, then Roadhog could just tank it, right? And it wouldn't mean not running any barrier at all, because you still could. It would just encourage running combinations instead. Reinhardt and Zarya, Orisa and Roadhog, Sigma and D.Va. You could run one barrier with something that wasn't, so that way you have this combination that would be effective against those extra damage towards barrier type abilities. Now, the second reason why I think this change to Sigma and Sombra is a bad idea is because it is inconsistent with how other abilities in the game work. If you have a character that places a permanent object in the map, like Widow with her Venom Mine or a Symmetra with the Teleporter, then those abilities will stay in place even when Sombra hacks the players. Other characters that have temporary constructed objects, like Orisa or Baptiste, are also not affected. Those objects have a timer, and therefore they will stay in existence even if the character gets hacked. However, there are two characters that have abilities that are at least mostly similar to how Sigma's barrier works, and this is going to be Mei with her Ice Wall and Zenyatta with his Orbs. In the case of Mei, while it is a temporary construction, it is still something that she is able to cancel early, which is different from any other temporary constructed object. If she gets hacked, this early destruction capability is disabled, which is exactly like how Sigma's barrier functions on the live version of the game. You get hacked, you can't cancel it early, you can't recall it, it is where it is, and that's it. The other character is Zenyatta, and while he doesn't construct anything, he is able to place buffs and debuffs on other players that are permanent and can be moved at any time. When he gets hacked, however, he cannot move these orbs, but they will remain in place on those characters that are being affected. Again, like the barrier on the live version of the game. You can throw it out, you place it where it's going to be, and it's going to stay there, but you can't change it if the character gets hacked. So while neither of these situations is a perfect match for Sigma's barriers, they still have very similar function, and this new change makes Sigma's barrier inconsistent with those other abilities in the game. And one of the big things about a game is that these sorts of abilities is that there needs to be consistency in the rules on how they work. Players need to know what should and shouldn't happen in any given situation based on these pre-established rules. And when abilities are changed to break these rules, it is frustrating for players who expected one thing to happen and yet get a different outcome. So now I get to the part of the video where I say the thing that other people are unwilling to say because they don't want to lose points or favorability with Blizzard. But I don't care about that, I care about making the game better. And what Blizzard just did is not a proper fix for the double barrier situation, or for Sigma in general. It is what is referred to as a band-aid fix. This is commonly done when the developers either A, don't know how to fix a problem, or B, the problem will take a long time to fix, and therefore they just slap something on temporarily to kind of mitigate the damage. The double barrier situation is causing a small amount of problems right now, but has potential to cause even greater problems in the future if more tank characters with barriers get added. I think that those barrier characters should be added, but at the same time, the issue needs to be addressed so that it doesn't cause long-lasting problems like the area effect healing did during GOATS comp. As I mentioned before, nerfing individual barriers does not solve the problem of the double barrier situation. It does the exact opposite. It makes it so that you might need to run double barrier in order to compensate for that weakening of each individual barrier. And then, as a result, single barrier comps become less viable because of it. For example, with this nerf, Sigma is now going to be far less effective to run as the primary tank with someone like a Zarya or a D.Va for backup. Sigma's barrier is a lot weaker than Reinhardt's, and yet it can be shut down by Sombra just as easily. This means that running Orisa will be optimal in most situations because the barrier doesn't get shut down. And this doesn't necessarily change the Orisa Sigma comp, as you can have the Orisa now compensating for the weakness of Sigma's barrier. And as I mentioned earlier, Sombra is already a strong counter to many characters, and she doesn't need to counter them even more. This is frustrating because this is a very similar situation to the band-aid fixes that Blizzard put in place trying to deal with GOATS comp. Rather than addressing the main issue, they slapped in sloppy fixes after sloppy fixes that didn't address the main problem of GOATS, which was the area effect healing. They also changed Brigitte's Shield Bash to be inconsistent with how all other physical attacks work. Reinhardt's Charge, Doomfist's Rocket Punch, D.Va's Boosters, etc., all physical melee type attacks go through barriers except Brigitte's Shield Bash. There were other possible changes that they could have made to solve the issue, but instead they made that ability inconsistent with the rest of the game. So in conclusion, yes, something needs to be done to address the current and future problems of the double barrier comps. However, this should be done by making more characters better effective against barriers, as opposed to making singular character the go-to hard counter in most situations. My suggestion, as mentioned before, was to give certain abilities bonus damage to barriers, but I'm sure there are other possibilities as well. Is this going to get rid of double barrier? Probably not. Is it going to make Sigma weaker as the primary tank? Yes, absolutely. Does this unnecessarily make Sombra even stronger of a counter? Yes, it does. So let me ask you guys, I'm sure you have plenty of ideas. What would you do in order to try to deal with the double barrier situation? Leave your ideas down below. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss anything. Also, come hang out in my Discord server and my Twitch live stream. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see what kind of cool VIP rewards you can get, check the links down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.